Hey guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I got to talk to Cliff Wilson. It's been a while and too long for me because I really enjoy the back and forth that me and Cliff have. Cliff is one of the people I've actually managed from the podcast to meet in real life, although I've met quite a few of the people in real life, but we had Cliff over for a seminar a while ago. Maybe there'll be one in future, and it's just been so great to kind of catch up with him and talk about his health and how that's improved over time and the kind of life lessons that that's instilled in him. And we also touch on a book that he's going to be releasing in the near future. Keep your eyes peeled for that, because this book sounds like it's going to be really helpful. It's going to be very different to what's out there in the market in terms of kind of self-help books. And I'm very excited for that, and lots and lots of lessons and takeaways during this podcast. So I think you're going to really enjoy it. I certainly had a fun time with Cliff. And as a reminder, the mini cut movement is running. So if you would like a group coaching process where you get your training taken care of, there's multiple training splits, male and female, nutrition pretty much completely taken care of, out of your hands, you don't need to worry about it, and have group support so that if there are any questions or issues that crop up over the period of time, you've got support there, then definitely hop on board. It might be time that you need to chop off a little bit of fat really efficiently. So guys, without further ado, let's get into this chat. Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I have Cliff Wilson back on the show. I think the majority of our listeners will be aware of who Cliff is, but it has been 2 years, I couldn't quite believe, since we'd spoken and recorded an episode. The last one was with Brett Freeman talking about conditioning, and
wow,
I mean, the time's flown, right?
I cannot believe it's been 2 years. Seriously.
It's kind of scary, actually, how quickly. I think, particularly, I don't know, when you're busy and you're productive, I guess, I mean, time flies when you're having fun. So I know you've been up to a lot. In fact, every season for you seems to be build upon the last season in terms of like your client accolades and everything like that, which is awesome to see, especially as like I'm a coach who aspires to that sort of thing. So it's amazing to see someone like doing that consistently, because I think you even maybe said it where you thought, maybe you'd see a plateau or maybe it would drop off at some point. And actually, this is related, sort of. I don't know if you know Jackson Pios. He's done lots of studies surrounding like diet breaks and things along those lines. He's based, well, in Bali, but Australia, most of all. Do you know Jackson? You might have seen his work. Yeah. So anyway, he's had bad health. We recently recorded an episode surrounding that. And it's, funny to see how many things kind of you have in line. But one of his worries was, like, he would put out a lot of training content and like his physique and like that sort of thing. So he had to really like scramble his brain, like what content can he produce to keep kind of driving clients through and things. And equally with you, I have so much respect, because it's so easy when you're unwell or sick, and like, I mean, training grounds us all, and it's an anchor for all of us. I'm sure you've kind of, you know that too, Cliff, but you've managed to keep thriving, which is, just amazing to see. But anyway, that was a bit of a ramble, a tangent in a sense.
I appreciate it. You know, it's like, it sounds like a good problem to have, because it is, but you know, it's like, I have been in the sport a long time, and I made a post about it recently, but it's like I kind of worried that I just got hold of a good batch of people, you know what I mean? And I did, but to start my career, and they just rattled off a ton of wins for 8 years or so, and I kind of worried as a lot of them started to retire, and so I kind of worried that I would never replicate that again. But I've been fortunate that the good people attracted good people, and so now I have a good young core group that are mid 20s to early 30s, and they're like, when they speak to me, I know that I've got a good group. It doesn't even matter about genetic talent. When it comes to coaching, what helps me know we're going to do good things is when they speak in terms of career, not this prep. And they talk about what we're going to do over the next years. And then I'm like, now we're ready to roll. You know what I mean? Because I'm not interested. I mean, one prep with someone is nice, but especially when you're a coach, being able to do 2 and 3 and 4 preps with them, that's when you really start to see the magic happen.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think every kind of coach is in the same boat where again, it sounds in some ways I'm like, it sounds like we're trying to make a business sales pitch. Yeah, sure, it's great to have a client for a long time, like, yeah,
Yeah.
paying our bills, but at the same time, you learn them better as an individual. They learn you communicate better, you get to experiment with things, and ultimately, like, again, there's only so many ways to kind of skin a cat. But if you're able to work with that individual and you're further and further individualizing things in your protocols, the outcomes are only going to improve. And I think a huge part of coaching is also that relationship. So the longer you get to kind of build that with someone, you know what to say to that person to get them to do what they need to do.
Yeah, yeah. I had a client this year, and not to take us too far off, but I had a client this year, like our first prep. She kind of barely won her pro card, and then her name was Tori Palpin. She kind of barely won her pro card, and then she took second in her pro debut a few years later, and we've been working together 8 years, and it's just like it culminated in her winning the IPE World Championships in women's physique this year. And it's like it's amazing to see her go from that point to just continue to build up to the highest the highest level in that federation, which is like an amazing experience. And there have been times where we've definitely butt heads over the 8 years. It's not like I always say you don't work with someone that long and you're like, oh, everything is perfect all the time. We've definitely had points where we're like, no, I think this. She says, no, I think this. And we kind of butt heads, but we know that we have the same ultimate goal. It's just whether or not we can come to terms on how to get there.
Yeah. No, I think that's well stated because, I mean, at the level you're coaching, Cliff, the people you're coaching are highly invested into the process. They're very often very well educated, and they understand a lot of the process and what needs to happen, and they're probably keeping up to date with, I don't know, they maybe listen to this podcast or something, and they might hear something, whatever it might be. Same with people I work with. So they come to you with ideas, and then it's kind of, you find a middle ground maybe, or whatever it might be. It's a conversation.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is a lot of them don't start out that way. A lot of my clients start out as beginners, and I would say like the conversations we have change over the years. I want them to get to the point where they'll argue with me if they feel passionate about something. You know what I mean? Like in the beginning, it's a little bit more of me saying, do this, do this, do this. But then, over the course of 3-4 years, then I want them to come back with some feedback of, hey, I like when we do this and I like when we change that. And it becomes more of a conversation at that point.
Yeah, no, it makes sense actually, is because I always say this, especially like with some of my more advanced clients, like I'm not in the gym with them, so I can't make those sort of decisions as well as what they could, so long as they understand what they're aiming for in that situation. Because like you said, when they're new, you kind of need to guide them there.
It's these are elite athletes, and I always say I don't like to micromanage my athletes. I like to let them build. The phrase I always use is you can't always tell Steph Curry what's a good shot. You can kind of give him principles, but when he's in the game, Steph Curry's got to shoot what he thinks he's got to shoot, and I kind of do that with my clients. Like I can't be in the gym with them. They're going to shoot their shots in the gym. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, the base of this discussion, although I think that discussion was very interesting, is we're talking about your health really, and where you've come from, where you've got to. I believe it's maybe about 20 weeks ago you posted on Instagram saying you're back into the gym lifting. How's that been going for you? I know there's kind of a big backstory there with lots of kind of interesting take homes that I'd be very interested to hear about.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, God, oh geez, about 3 years ago now, my daughter got mono. She was only a baby at the time. My daughter got mono, and she was so young. She got it from daycare, and so it's like not normal. She was sick for a good 2-3 weeks. She kind of passed it to her mom and my current wife here, and they got sick like normal mono, 3 weeks to a month, and I got it, and it just did not go away. I was sick for about a year with mono, fever pretty much every day, which was brutal. And I'm just going to speed through some of this, but it kind of, I was so sick for so long, it created just a lot of complications. The term the doctor used was, my body was ravaged by a virus, and I was like dealing with just a lot of weird side effects from like that. They refer to it as like a post-viral syndrome, is that, once even after the mono was gone, I mean, the year alone of just like completely not training, I was confined to a bed practically for a year, just doing client emails, laying in bed. But weird side effects after, like intense fatigue, sores like in my mouth and stuff like that. Couldn't even tolerate light because my eyeballs would hurt.
Oh,
Swollen spleen, like you wouldn't believe. There was talk of whether or not it had to come out. And so like that lingered for a long time. But another thing that was an issue is that it created an issue with my heart. I suspect there's always been a low level lingering heart issue, but it kind of made it uncontrolled as I have atrial fibrillation where it comes out of rhythm. I had an episode, gosh, about a year and a half ago now that I ended up having a stroke as well. And so
oh no.
it's kind of been one thing, yeah, one thing after another.
Oh God.
And so I was completely out of the gym for a good 2 years. Just couldn't really train. And I wasn't really telling people what was going on because I just was like, I'm going to focus on me. But then when I kind of started to come out of it, I had to start somewhere. I still deal with the issues with my heart, some of the post-viral stuff, but it's like slowly getting better. I'm on a decent amount of heart medication, keeping my heart in rhythm. But it started off with the process of just I'm getting into the gym one day a week, doing one set per muscle group, kind of a half-ass workout, but I'm moving,
Yeah.
getting to the point where like I'm not exhausted just walking again. I'd get on the treadmill a little bit. And so now I'm back to the point where I can be a little bit more functional, and it's made me happy. Some people have told me I look like a normal off-season natural bodybuilder, which feels great. Again, like I actually have like a little bit of muscle. Muscle memory is a fantastic thing.
Yeah. Oh man, Cliff, that sounds like nothing anyone would want to go through. I don't think you'd even wish that sort of process on your worst enemy, because it's not just the severity was pretty high, but the length of time that lasted, to have a fever each and every day, that's not something I'd want to experience.
Yeah, there was a point where I definitely, I wasn't saying it within that year, because I guess there's some rare cases where some people will get mono and their body just essentially becomes over. It's the Epstein-Barr virus that causes it, and their body will essentially be overwhelmed, and it can cause some serious issues. And I was thinking it for a while when I was so sick, but I was like trying to still like show up for my family. Luckily, I had like daughter. She was about a year old, and my ex-wife was super supportive, and Haley, my current wife, was super supportive, and I kind of had like those two helping me out through the whole process. And so I would do my work and take care of my daughter as best I could, but I had so much help in that. But I was thinking it for a while, and I didn't want to scare Haley, but I was like, I remember thinking for a while, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to live through this. I know that sounds
Right.
dramatic, but it was that bad. Like it was so bad. And I don't want to like some of the issues I was having. I mean, to even go into them, it was just so bad. Like the fevers would spike so high, and because it was a virus, there wasn't really a lot they could do. I went to the hospital a few times to like, get like IV and stuff like that, because also I was having trouble eating because I was having such bad sores in my mouth it was just really, it was wild. It was crazy. And, finally after about 9 months of it, I just told Haley, I was like, listen, we need to be honest. I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to live through this, and she was, I thought those words would devastate her, but then she was like, she was like, I know, she's like, I've been thinking the same thing. And so, we even took steps to like start making financial arrangements, because we just really didn't know what was going to happen to me. And, probably about 3 months after, all of a sudden I was like, I wasn't getting the fevers, and it was just like, it was the biggest baby steps you could possibly imagine. And all the while trying to still coach was pretty difficult. My clients were very forgiving, because usually I kind of pride myself on fast response times, but I was doing my best, but they understood that I would at least get them what they needed when they needed it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, everybody around was really supportive, but man, it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal.
Yeah, that's, it's not a conversation anyone wants to have with anyone in their life, let alone kind of, their partner and with a young child and everything. And then I think it speaks to you as a coach in terms of like your clients. I think like if you didn't have the respect and trust of your clients, some of them, I don't know, they might have left you because they don't have that consistency of you previously, but they trust you at this point where it's like, oh, I know Cliff's got my back. I know he's going to give me what I need. Right now, he needs me to just accept that he's going to be a bit slow and behind, but it's not like I'm going to get Cliff back and he's going to be able to help me again. So that's really nice to hear that you had that security, because I think a lot of coaches listening would probably worry like in that situation.
Yeah. And you know, I don't think I've ever actually mentioned this publicly, but I'll it's kind of funny. You know, the virus actually, the mono didn't even start to clear up on its own. I don't know. I went to like 5 different doctors, and they're like, it's a monovirus. We can't really do anything for it. And I was like, I was frustrated. And so I'm surrounded by a lot of smart people. And so I consider myself fairly intelligent. My wife is probably one of the smartest people I've ever known. She was going to be a marine biologist, but her degree's in biochemistry. My dad's a PhD, and it's in plant pathology, but it's also, it's like epidemiology as well. And I also have a client who is a medical doctor. And so I kind of was like picking the brains of everyone I know. We actually found some interesting studies showing that the drug that treats herpes, actually it's an antiviral, actually has some benefit against the monovirus. And so we found, and I brought it to a couple of doctors. Now they're like, well, these are kind of obscure studies and we need more evidence. I'm like, I need to try something, right?
Sure.
And so finally I reached out to my client that's a doctor, and I'm like, hey, can you help me get this treated, get a prescription for this? And he's like, sure, yeah. He's like, let's, give it a shot. And he's like, sometimes these things that, are, maybe not necessarily for what you're using it for can be helpful. And I kind of went off of a couple of studies, and I used that antiviral in pretty high dosages. And that's when the fever started to break within like 2 weeks of using it. And so we kind of self-treated. We self-treated it, and it worked though. It was the thing that actually kind of like helped me starting the process of turning around and getting healthy again. So it was, and my brother's a pharmacist, so I had like the right people around me.
Sure.
But it was frustrating because I think a lot of doctors are used to like somebody coming in that isn't gonna like take control of their health in their own hands. And I literally like brought the studies in to show, a few of the doctors, and they're like, well, I need more evidence. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, you prescribe, if somebody comes in and says I have herpes, I'll give this medication to them in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I like, just let me try it, And so that was the thing that got me turned around.
That's crazy. And again, credit to you and the people you're surrounded by. But yeah, I guess if you're at the point where you're like, nothing's working, you feel helpless, you're worried like the worst is going to happen, you're willing to try anything, especially, I imagine, I don't know, with you took into consideration the risks and the downsides of taking such a thing anyway. So
yeah. And the risks were fairly minimal. The only thing I was risking was like, I was taking some fairly high dosages of it, but like the risk was just, a little bit of kidney liver issues. But I mean, the risk was so minimal. And like I said, I even ran it by my brother, the dosages, because he's a nuclear pharmacist, so he was pretty familiar with the toxicity issues. So and so I was like, not a problem at all. And so it went really well. And then I tapered off the dosages. I started to get better, and then I just was able to stabilize after that.
And do you think your reaction to mono was mostly genetically driven, or do you think there was any other like outside influencing factors that could have put you in a worse position?
I do think it was, two things. One, I do think it's a little bit of both. One, I think it was some genetics, because I've always just gotten sicker than most. When, I don't get sick terribly often, but whenever somebody in my life would get sick, I was like, oh, here we go. Because they'll get it and they'll get, sore throat, maybe a fever of like 101. I know if I get it, it's going to be like really bad sore throat, fever of 103. Been that way since I was a kid. So I think that's a factor. Like I seem to always just have a really strong response when I get sick. It was also a very stressful time I got sick. You know, it's, you know, it was, for those that don't know, it's like, sounds like such a messy situation, but me and my wife at the time were going through a divorce. We had a newborn baby, which complicated things, and we were as amicable as could be. We're still amicable. We're, you know, she just came over to our house for Christmas Eve, and you know, it's like such a stressful situation, you know, and so I think that an already immune system that I have combined with stress, and I wasn't sleeping as much because I have a baby at home, you know. And so it was just, I think it was the combination of these things that was like probably too much.
Yeah. No, I can totally see that. I guess it makes complete sense. It's always going to be a combination of factors. I just wondered if, I don't know, my head goes into things that I see you putting out there in terms of like your work ethic, and I don't know how, if there's nights of sleep that aren't as good, and whether you thought there was any chance that had any influence there, like your drive to work.
Yeah, you know, I work a lot, but interestingly enough, so I guess everything's all relative. So I work a ton, but I also always make sure in my sleep, my daughter has always slept well. I've been so fortunate. There's probably some parents that would kill me if they knew how she slept so easily through the night from such a young age. But I've always slept like 8 to 9 hours of sleep, you know, a night. Um, it's usually shifted, like I'm more of a night owl, but I make sure I get the eight, you know, eight at least. Um, but and I'm usually a very low stress person. So it's also possible that being in like a situation where I don't, how do I put this? I'm usually not somebody that feels like any stress. Like I'm a zero stress person. So I was also in a situation where I was actually feeling stress which is such an odd sensation for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's possible that, you know, it's just like, just such a new sensation for me. And so I think that that was a big factor. Because for me, and this may sound weird, but sometimes I enjoy work much. Not just the work that but any work that I'm passionate about. It actually feels more stressful to me to not do it. You know, it's
Yeah,
more
sure.
like doing work never feels stressful to me. You know, sometimes when people talk about like, oh, they're grinding and this and that, I never feel grinding. Working a lot on something I'm passionate about, at least, doesn't feel like grinding. It feels like just jumping into a river and letting it take me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, but I do always try to find like a good work life balance. I think it's like, you know, appropriate for everybody. You know,
Yeah.
my wife Haley, she understands I'm going to work more than most, but she also knows like when I'm spending time with the family, um, this is probably due to the low stress side of me. But when I'm spending time with my family, I'm not thinking about work at all. You know, it's like, you know, now is family time. My phone's not near me. I don't even think about it. Like there's nothing on my mind except family. So I think I can sometimes get away with working a little bit more because it doesn't bleed into my family life at all.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think myself and maybe a lot of the listeners included are jealous of you being so low stress. I wish I was that chilled all the time, but I can't say I am. But I'm glad to hear that you're taking care of your stress and your sleep and everything as well for you and your
Yeah.
situation.
Well, it's kind of funny. I'm not sure if you're familiar in like the psychology. It's you know, sometimes people like the Myers-Briggs personality test, but
Yeah,
that's not really accepted all that much in like psychological research. But the one that is like a bit more of a personality test is the big five personality traits.
sure.
Is a little bit more accepted in the research. Um, and so you know, it's kind of funny. I took it one time. I was less familiar with it until Haley, my wife, introduced it to me. So I took it, and one of the personality traits is neuroticism. And you know, like, you know, usually you score anywhere from, you know, it's on a scale of 100%. You know, so uh, you know, you score somewhere in between a 0 and 100. I scored a 0% on neuroticism, and she looked at it. She goes, "You bastard."
Yeah. Yeah, I'd hate to think where I'd score on neuroticism. I think that's like a strong trait of mine, unfortunately. But so I guess people will be thinking now for you, Cliff, where does this leave you? Kind of, are you at a point where things are still continuing to improve? Where do you see your future? And I guess after that, we can talk about maybe some of the lessons that it's brought to you.
Yeah, yeah. That's been the hardest part, the word you use there, future. Um, because this whole time, one of the hardest parts mentally was, okay, so first, the hard part was, am I going to live through this? There's the question of, do I have any future at all? Then once I started to improve, it kind of became, okay, what does life look like from here? There were a lot of questions in my head, um, because I was at such a low point. I posted some photos. My normal walking around off season weight was like 190 to 195, maybe up to 200 pounds. I was up to 240 because I was like bedridden for a year. I was up to 240, and it was just, I was really out of shape. And so I guess it was kind of the question of bodybuilding was so far from my mind. Once I started to improve, I was like, I just need to get a normal life going again. um, of course, like I had thoughts of will I ever compete again, but I tried to like put those out of my head. I just need to focus on one step at a time, which was like get healthy, to be able to like just interact with the world again. Like one of the hardest things was that some of my daughter's first words were "Daddy's sick" and "Daddy's tired." Those were like the first words she said about me, which was not fun to hear, Um, and so I kind of wanted to undo that memory of me,
Yeah.
because I usually throughout my life, one thing that I'd always kind of felt like I had was an energy to me, and so I just had zero energy at all, and so I was kind of focused on that, but still always the lingering question of what does this look like long term. I didn't know how in shape I would be able to get again, and that also had led to lingering questions of my work. If I'm, traveling was so hard. I tried traveling a few times in those early days of being a little bit healthier, and it was just so brutal. It's like I was just exhausted, and I would have issues with like I couldn't even go out during the day because my eyes would hurt. So it's like I questioned, could I continue to coach people if one, I'm like out of shape and I'm never going to events? Would I continue to have people contact me for coaching if I'm not doing this and I'm not seeing anywhere? It's not like people would stop instantly, but would my clientele just dwindle over time? So there was questions of that, just a lot of questions about future. So it's kind of been I've tried to, it's natural to like look toward the future and think to yourself, what does my life look like 5 years from now? And I've kind of always shied away from making long-term plans to a degree, just for multiple reasons, which I kind of feel are beneficial. But I've really had to like really hardline that even more, is like try not to even look more than 6 months in the future, just focus on like what I can do today. It's like my health is getting to the point where sometimes my mind entertains the idea of competing again. Even if I was not what I was when I do it, it would be nice to just get up there and, at least in my mind, competing again, even if I wasn't what I was, it would feel like a completion of a comeback in a sense. Do you know what I mean? If I could just get up on stage. So there's a part of me that would like to one day do that. And luckily for the heart issue, I have a good cardiologist. She's like a 7-year-old Indian woman, and she really understands that I'm an athlete as well.
Nice.
When I walk into her office, I see her every 3 months. And when I walk in, the first thing she says, "So how's training?" And so I'm like, this is my kind of doctor,
Yeah.
But it's, I'd be lying if I said there's not a part of me that would like to get up on stage. At that point, it's shifted in terms of that. Like maybe it's not for the goal of winning a title anymore, honestly even bringing my best, because my best may be behind me. I don't know, but just for the purpose of completing a comeback. But right now, I would say my most immediate step is I'm trying to enjoy training again. Um, that sounds bad. It feels good to get in there and move and everything, but anybody who enjoys training knows that part of the fun of training is actually like going in there and working hard. And this whole process, I've been able to work harder and harder in the gym, but it's this constant process of holding myself back, which, I mean, nobody likes deload workouts. I'm on
Yeah.
a constant deload to one degree or another. And so, because and the hard part is sometimes on a given day, I feel like I can get in there and I can just do it. And my strength is still pretty good. And so it's hard when you have some energy and you feel like you could do it, but you run the risk of your heart coming out of rhythm. You know that you'll have those post viral symptoms show up in 1 to 2 days after because you just can't recover like you used to. So it's not as fun to get in the gym and just hold yourself back perpetually. So it's like my most immediate term in terms of training is just to get in there and hopefully get to a point where I don't have to always hold myself back. Maybe have some sessions where I can just train hard and enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like your body is in this heightened state of just, it feels everything. Like if we travel, sure, I get a little bit tired. I notice the time difference, but it's not like a overwhelm. Like the sun outside isn't causing me a problem. Like it's absolutely fine. That's in fact, it's helping kind of entrain circadian rhythms or whatever again. But for you, like every little thing for you sounded like it was, and getting back into gym, holding yourself back, absolutely. Like I can see how frustrating that absolutely can be.
You're absolutely right. The hypersensitivity. And there's certain weird sensations that I felt really strongly getting back into the gym, and I still feel them, but just not as much. Like, first got into the gym, it would be like I knew I would hit to the point. I don't even know what this is, but one of the things that tells me when I'm hitting my tipping point, like I need to cut this session off, is that like have you ever done when I was healthy, did you ever do those sessions where you would train so hard, like probably in your, everybody has their young and dumb training days where you just like overdo it, obliterate yourself but you would like start to become sore in the session. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
I've had close to that. Yeah.
yeah. But like that, I remember that feeling like from back in my 20 years old, right? But I can get that sometimes from just like 4 or 5 sets. And there's a point where doing a set and I'm like, I'm starting to get sore. And it feels like a soreness that is like deep down in the muscle tissue, just from 4 or 5 sets, not to failure, not even close to failure. And when I start feeling that, I'm like, I gotta stop. I've got to
Yeah.
stop. This is something's, you get signals. And you're right, everything is just hypersensitive. And it took me a while to learn those signals, because there's this old school, like there's this old mindset that creeps in of just like you push through it.
Push through it. Yeah.
But and in the early days of getting back in the gym, it's like I had to change my way of thinking. Like, no, you don't push through it. There's pushing through it is not helpful in this scenario. And so now it sucks because sometimes I'll feel good. I'll feel like I'm going to get to the gym and I'm going to have like maybe a little bit more intense session, and I'll literally get in there and I'll do 3 sets and I start to feel that feeling and I'm like, I got to shut it down, especially if I want to try to train again in maybe 2 days.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's interesting. And you kind of, it sucks because, I also, at my gym, some of the people kind of know me, and they may or may not know the health issues I'm going through. And so like,
Sure.
sometimes I feel like they're probably like, what the hell is Cliff doing? He just walked in, did 3 sets and walked right out. But, it's one of those things where, it's definitely been an ego check. And the mentality that works for me, um, maybe this starts getting into your question of like, what have I learned? And I feel like, truthfully, how do I put this? And I said this at the risk of sounding arrogant. I don't know if I learned a whole lot in terms of things I hadn't already been thinking or doing, but it was definitely a test of a mentality that I've been honing for a lot of years. And it was a test, and it kind of made me dig my heels in and maybe go further into that mentality. And I guess like an explanation of kind of what I was going into just now is that if I'm going to talk about one thing I always preach to my clients, one thing I think that's usually a very difficult mindset is like when I'm dealing with a person's identity, right? Bodybuilders have big identity issues. I'm sure you have seen this. You know, they're like, I'm a bodybuilder, I'm tough. You know, they view themselves as a bodybuilder. And actually, what identity marker that I think can be a negative sometimes is when people have this identity of themselves as I'll always be the hardest worker, because it works to a point and it's detrimental thereafter. And what I mean by that is, you know, if you're always just trying to prove you're the hardest worker, you know, sometimes you're missing out on effective work. Um, and you know, because sometimes you'll make better progress not being the hardest worker. You know, you need to take days off, you need to rest, you need to sometimes sit and relax. So one thing I've always done for the last several years, even before I got sick, was when I would get that vibe from somebody, they've got to be the hardest worker. You know, I'm always grinding. And I'd say, why don't we start changing you being, I am the guy that's the hardest worker. I'm the girl that's the hardest worker. Why don't you start changing that identity to, I'm the person that'll always get the job done, even if sometimes that means doing less, or I'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. You know, even that if that means resting, you know, I'll do what others won't, because that's a more effective mentality. And it's like I'd kind of been using that for several years, and so it became a useful tool, and I had to like dig in more on that for myself. I'd kind of always adopted that in work and in training, and I kind of needed to do that with health. I kind of needed to take a lot of things that I'd learned from bodybuilding and training and work and like start to apply it to my health because it needed it, you know? And so there was a point where I was like, I told Haley, I was like, I need to start, I need to start working on applying all that to my health. And I would say like, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll do whatever it takes to get healthy. That means one day a week for 6 months, you know, and that was hard. And I'll do what it takes with my health. And that means, you know, taking the financial hit, and we hired like a nanny to come for a while to like take some of the stuff off my shoulders. You know, it's like you set these things up. And so that was probably the thing that was hard. Just like I had like the tools in place, the infrastructure for the mentality that I needed, but it was hard for me to be like, no, I need to be even more this way, or apply some of these things to my health as well as my work and my bodybuilding.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
I think that's a great lesson. And like you said, there's so many probably bodybuilders and people listening who completely understand your point there. and probably find themselves too often feeling like they want to be the hardest worker in the room. And like, it's nice to have a nice mentality shift there where it's not like, I don't know, it's like calling a deload week, calling it, like some people say, as a reload week, like we're reloading for the next. It's like changing it into a positive almost. So it's like, we all know we need to deload, like reload it, because it's going to lead to more success moving forward. It's like, it still sounds very hardcore to say I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get to the outcome, like you said, because that includes pulling back and doing things that to us feels foreign and uncomfortable.
Yeah. And you know, along with that, like, I would also say, patience. Like I've always been a pretty patient. Anybody who's a natural bodybuilder is already patient, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if you're a natural bodybuilder, you're already pretty patient. But I had to embrace patience and nonlinear progress, like to the max. Because, you know, I mean, when you're lifting, there's always some nonlinear nature. Because, you know, sometimes you'll hit a PR, or, you know, then you won't hit it for a while, and then, you know, we're bodybuilders, we get super lean, and then we take a couple years off season. We won't get that lean again for a few years. But it was very difficult to sometimes be like, you know, sometimes I would train with a certain degree of intensity, and I needed to be okay with being like, maybe I won't hit that intensity for 2 more months again. You know, maybe that intensity. I actually got to the point where I would train like 2 days, train. I would train again. I don't know why in the early going, but I would feel my worst 2 days after training, rather than the day after. So I got to the point too where I would play like 2 days in a row, and then I would take like 5 days off, because I found that then I could schedule my check-ins for work. Like once I started to feel a little bit better after those 2 training days, like I would kind of push them all together. Yeah, I was working some weird schedules there to make it all work. I'd played around with a lot of things, but you know, and it was difficult because, you know, you'd want to train more consistently, and sometimes you'd be like, oh, I'm going to take 10 days off here, and then, you know, get back to it just when you start to feel normal. And it really made me like, I kind of just started telling myself, like, I'm not looking to the future at all. I'm not even looking to next week. I would sometimes also just be like, I'm going to wake up every morning and I'm going to do what I can do that day. And I'm going to view it as, it sounds so weird, like weird self-talk here, but it was helpful. I would tell myself, progress isn't good. Sounds weird, but I would say progress isn't good. The progress wasn't good. The process was good. And so I would tell myself, getting better wasn't what I was after. Doing more than I did before wasn't what I was after. All I was after was waking up and doing what I could do that day. And I would wake up. Some days I couldn't do anything, and I would tell myself, if you can't do anything training wise, that's good too, because you're recovering. And then I'd wake up the next day. I can go to the gym and I can do 3 sets. That's good, because it's what I can do today. And it was like the most simple, you know, approach, right? Wake up each day and do what you can do. And then before you know it, what you can do happens to be more than it was 2 months ago. And it was like the most day by day baby step process I could possibly explain. And it was frustrating at times. And sometimes I have to catch myself, like, stop looking that way or that way just today, you know?
Yeah. It sounds very stoic in terms of focusing on what you can control, don't focus on what you can't, and also like process oriented thinking versus goal driven. And do you think having the background of bodybuilding and going through like contest preps and working with people through that, though it sounds like some of the tools you even picked up during that really actually assisted you through the recovery process and just made you lean on them more?
It really did. You know, I think we've even done a lot in a lot of our previous interviews. We've talked about process over, you know, over the result. And so it was that, but just to the max. I mean, it was getting to the point where it was like, I would even, you know, I couldn't even look to the next day. You know, bodybuilders lay out there like training splits.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't do a training split. And not only that, I would even sometimes walk into the gym not knowing what I was going to train until I went through like a warm up and seeing what muscle group felt like it could handle it, it was almost hour by hour process based. It was weird. And so and then there'd even be other times where I'd wake up and I'd be like, I don't know if I can train today. So then I'd kind of like, okay, what do I have to do to give myself a chance to train today? Okay, let's eat breakfast. Let's see. A nap would probably help, so I'd take a nap, and it would just be like, and then after I'd wake up, give a yes or a no. I mean, it was real paint by numbers to the next step, and just trying not to look too far ahead, because if you start looking too far ahead, um, as bad as this sounds, because I know a lot of people really thrive on hope, but I think hope can be dangerous as well, because if you get your hopes up for a training session tomorrow and it doesn't happen when you enjoy it, that's something you have to recover from too, mentally. So it was like, it was very live in the now. Don't focus on hope, don't focus on the future, just focus on now. And it was also good too, because I've always kind of been that way, but once again, I just had to take it to a new level, but also it was beneficial because I got to the point where, in the early days, I couldn't play with my daughter. I actually remember the first time when she was, old enough where I actually played with her outside, because I was finally healthy enough to do it. And so it really does kind of like, also I was like, doing this now, this is good too. It's like I wasn't even focused on doing this or that. I was just playing with my daughter, or going on a date with my wife. Like I there was a while where we couldn't go out anywhere, so now I can do those things, and it's really carried over in that I am much more appreciative of these moments because they were taken from me. Um, Anybody who's ever gotten, like, you ever get like a cold or a sore throat or something like that, and then after you get well, you're like, how good is it to breathe through my nose again, or like feel healthy again? It's like that, but it's lingering years after. Now I'm like very appreciative of all these like normal things that I get to do again.
Yeah, I can completely see that. It forces you to really take perspective and be mindful of all of that as well. And I think that is something, again, some of the younger bodybuilders possibly get into. I certainly was probably there at some point, and maybe at risk of slightly being there a little bit still now, in terms of like you're the bodybuilder, and that is kind of who you are. And it's like, when that's all stripped away from you, what do you have left? And so that's kind of what it did for you. Is, I mean, everything was almost stripped away for you, but you had other things that kind of kept you centered and grounded in that sense, which is really good.
Yeah, and it's one thing that was a very we had kind of talked about this when we were setting up this, but it was also helpful for me. I did, while I was sick, because I was like bedridden and it was hard at times, I had to rewrite some of it because I was like, fevery. But and I did write a book way at it slowly while I was sick, and it was therapeutic in some ways, because it allowed me to, it's a mentality book, and I kind of it allowed me to really kind of root in on what I know to be effective, from a mental state. And so it was kind of perfect timing, because it was therapeutic to be able to like write what I know, and I would write it, and then I'd kind of be forced to, like, it'd be fresh in my mind, and then it's like, okay, now I got to go live it. It was helpful. And so yeah, I think that you mentioned the identity portion. It's like, I kind of talk about this a lot with my bodybuilders with identity, is that there are certain identity things that really sound cool. I'm a bodybuilder, I'm the hardest worker in the room, but it's like you have to have more things holding up your sense of self, um, because and it's weird, because I used to talk about this. If you look back, you may even remember I have posts like, if you like, if something happened where you couldn't be a bodybuilder anymore, like, how long is it going to take you to recover from that? And it's like, of course, anybody who's a bodybuilder and cares about it, that's a blow. That's a blow. But I think that if you have other things holding up your sense of self, relationships or values or interests or hobbies, it just makes you that much stronger. Sometimes people get this idea that like, I'm so focused on my bodybuilding, I don't care about anything, I don't need anybody, I just need to bodybuild. And they think that sounds cool. When I hear that stuff, I think to myself, very fragile, and I don't mean it as an insult, I mean it as a literal, like, it's not going to take much to knock you off your center, and you're going to be struggling to pick up the pieces. The best bodybuilders that I have ever worked with, when I say best, I mean, yeah, usually they've done quite a bit on stage, but also the people that get the most out of themselves, bodybuilding, family, work, they have like this well-rounded piece. Because it's like, if they get an injury, that way, if they get an injury, or they get or bad placing, you know what they do? They go, all right, onto the, not a big deal. But people that are only bodybuilders, they get a bad placing, and what do? They binge eat, and it takes them a month to recover from a bad placing. And so I think that the more people can kind of like, they'll be more resilient if they can have other things that prop up who they are, rather than I'm the hardest worker and I'm a bodybuilder.
Yeah, I think it's so well said. I think it's very easy for people because bodybuilding is inherently quite a selfish thing, but to put your eggs all in that basket, like that's a very tricky thing to go and do. I know you mentioned the book, and we probably haven't got a ton of time to dig into it, and maybe we'll do another episode at some point. Do you have a title for it out of interest? You said it was a mentality book. I'm wondering if I have a feeling of a title, but I don't know if it is this.
No, I do have a title. It's all right. Maybe we can do it on the next one. I'll share it because I want to make sure I got the rights to it and everything like that.
Okay.
But no, I'm excited for it. Like I said, I've been done with it. So I'm self-publishing this one. I went with a publisher for my first book, which I'm glad I did because it got accredited, through, the ISSN and all the major sanctioning, groups and everything. But this one, it's a mentality book. Essentially, I've tried to take I had the idea before I got sick, but I wanted to compile, because I do so much work with my clients on like trying to instill the right mindset into them. And it's not just these traditional motivation books. Honestly, they piss me off. I mean, it's real. You know what it is? It's rah locker room pep talk stuff. Sure. It's like, get out there and take life by the balls, and you can do this. And it's real. I mean, it's real annoying to me. It's not an actual analysis of like what drives human behavior. And so I spent so many years trying to like nudge clients in one direction or the other, and I just thought it would be good to kind of put everything into a book that I try to instill in my clients in terms of principles, behavior, actions, thoughts. And it borders, my wife read it and she had a great point. She said if it kind of crosses between psychology, because I do have a lot of cited sources, I think well over 100, psychology research combined with maybe a life philosophy. And it's, my hope with it is that I don't want, and I didn't write it in a way, because also another thing that I don't like is how sometimes people write books that are more step-by-step guides,
Sure.
10 rules for this, or I'm not trying to do that. What I'm trying to do is provoke thought. I'm not even saying that you need to do everything that I write down here. I'm trying to get you to think about the way you do things and tell you what I do and what I've found to be effective. And then you can use what works and, discard what doesn't. And so, I self-publishing it. So with that, anyway, I'm self-publishing it. So I finished it a while ago, but I underestimated how long the editing process would actually take. And so I'm almost done. Like we're right there. Then it's just it's pre-sale. But yeah, so I'm pretty excited. At the risk of like propping it up, it's probably, at least whether or not other people like it, for me, it's the thing that I did I'm probably proudest of.
Oh, that says a lot, because you have a lot of things that you've done that I could think of that you'd be proud of. So that's really cool. Do you have any chapters, and like, do you have chapter titles? Can you share those? Can you share one that's maybe your favorite?
Yeah. So what I did was each chapter, I have like an intro chapter, But then I have each chapter thereafter is dedicated to the characteristics that I think make someone mentally tough, formidable. So the first chapter is all about motivation. And each chapter builds on and ties them together, by the way. So it's like they have to go in this order essentially, but motivation is the after the intro chapter, and then it goes to confidence, and then resilience. Because I always say, like, those two, like, for example, tie together. You can't be motivated unless you're confident. Like, you're not going to be motivated to do something unless you're confident you can produce some sort of positive outcome. You know what I mean? So that's why they tie together, confidence and motivation. And then resilience. If you're only confident until you meet a hardship, you're not really that confident. Do you know what I mean? So those two tie together. And then discipline kind of an offshoot of all of those, really. And then the final chapter, which I really like, my favorite's probably the final one. It's probably the one that people will dislike the most or fight me on the most. But the last one is titration. Most people consider I'm using this as a personality trait. For those that are familiar with the term titration, they'll think of it in terms of like chemistry or medicine, where you can. It means to continually measure and adjust to the balance of. So like if somebody is sick, a doctor will titrate their medication based on their condition. But I use that as a personality trait often with my clients. I want individuals who are titrating. They will continually measure and adjust the balance of themselves and the path they are taking. One of the worst things that I get when clients tell me is, I'm a type A personality. I get after it. And I always tell them, well, maybe try not to be the same way in all situations. You know what I mean? Like, the most effective individuals are titrating. Sometimes you need to kick in the front door of a situation. The other time is you need to ring the doorbell. You know what I mean? I want individuals who are titrating, and I want them to also be able to titrate their path. There is a lot of interesting research that shows that people that are heavily goal motivated, they do get moving, but their results are oftentimes lesser than someone who is much more process oriented. So sometimes I want people to be able to work towards an improved competence level and not necessarily work towards a specific outcome, just be better, And so that's probably the one. I back it up with a lot of research, some cool research, even based on like artificial intelligence, some cool research from military training. But I even put some history into the book. And so I think it'll be different, but I think it'll be an interesting read and gives people some things to think about.
I like the sound of it. I'm sure a lot of the listeners will as well, especially if, again, a lot of kind of bodybuilding coaches who look up to yourself. I think it's probably something they'd be very interested in, kind of getting into your mind and what's been useful to you as a coach, because I'm sure many of the lessons in there you've applied to your career as a whole, because I mean, it's a large part of who you are.
Yeah, I have. And, that was another reason I wanted to write it. Like, I wanted to write this book too, is that sometimes I think put too much on coaches to fix all of their motivational and psychological deficiencies. I'm not, and so I wanted to create something. So I have my bodybuilding book, and a lot of times I know coaches will read it and they'll learn from it and they'll apply. But it's hard for coaches. I understand that it's hard for coaches to recommend my book because every coach has their own way of doing things. And so if their client reads my book, then they're going to have to be like, well, why do you do this when Cliff says this?
Yeah.
So, I understand that my book is hard for coaches to recommend to their clients, and sometimes in an educational fashion. But this, I don't write it from the perspective of, I think I referenced powerlifting in it once. That's it. Because I wanted it to be something that when coaches have these clients that are continually undermotivated, not confident, they crumble at the first, hardship. I want this to be something they can hand over to their clients and put some of that responsibility on them to better themselves. and once again, I wrote it in a fashion that's not this rah locker room pep talk. I always call that superficial, that's superficial motivation. A lot of motivational books, they'll get you moving for a month, maybe two, until you got to read the next book. That was never my intent with this thing.
And often the title of the book gives you everything that the book has in one go. Just like that title, I just read that book for how many days, and it's literally the title of the book gave me everything. Actually, I guess that brings me, you might have alluded to it there, Cliff. Do you have a target person in mind or audience in mind for the book who, if you're thinking this is who I would say would really benefit from this? Because I'm kind of thinking the listeners would, but there might be a person you're specifically thinking of.
No, I mean, it's somebody. No, I wrote it in a manner that I didn't want there to be a target audience, essentially, because I do think the stuff in there applies broadly to whatever you want to work towards. Essentially, it's it's a self-improvement in the terms of how you go about life, and then you can aim it in whatever direction you want. And I wrote it with that in mind. And the thing that made me happy is I've had a few people review it. I had my dad do the first pass of editing because he was a scientific editor, and he's a great writer. He has a history of writing, and probably one of the better compliments I've ever gotten was that after he read it, I mean, first off, my dad is a harsh editor. I mean, there was like no sentence untouched. He's always edited anything you've ever written by me. If it, it's like books or articles or whatever, my dad's always edited it for me. And so, but he always a lot of it, right? But it's good. But after he read it, he even started applying to some different types of work and stuff like that. And he was even, because he's been retired for a while now as a plant pathologist, but he's like, I was wanting to get back into it. And he goes, there were a few things in your book that really helped me kind of hone in on what I wanted and how to go about getting it. So far, the only handful of people have read the book. You never know. You never know if they're just saying, "Oh, I like it," because they
Sure.
know you. But so far, the thing that's made me happiest is not that they've said they like it after they read it, is that everybody that's read the book, all of them have come back, maybe a month later and just said, you said something in there that I applied in this way. They've actually told me in the ways that they've applied it, which has been I've been very gratifying to hear, because that's what I want. I want people to think, like, it didn't just motivate them to get out there and be like, yeah, I'm going to go attack the world. It was like they digested it for a while and then they used it. That's what I want.
Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. And it sounds great. I'd be very interested to see it when it comes out, which I guess leads me to the question of, do you have an idea of when it might be available to the public? Is it ebook or is it going to be, it sounds like it's going to be a hard copy. Is that right?
I'm going to do both, because I mean, over half my following is not in the US anymore.
Yeah.
And so I can't, it'll be too hard to ship them over there. So I'm going to do ebook and hard copy. I'm aiming for a pre-sale on April 1st. So coming soon. And then, and it's even kind of funny. I as a kind of a disclaimer too, and it's one thing that's kind of, so at one point I did look into hiring an editor rather than just using the people close to me in my circle to edit it along with myself. But I found that everybody was like, well, you can zhuzh up the language here, and you can really like have more an impact statement here. And and the funny thing is that and I did have it reviewed by a psychologist to make sure I didn't have any gaps in my knowledge. So I had the content reviewed by a psychologist, and but I specifically actually wrote it in a way to avoid emotional charge. It may sound funny, because a lot of times people are like, you need to write this book that's emotionally charged and emotionally impactful. Trying to get away from these typical motivational books, I actually specifically wrote it in a manner, just to give an example, because I want to explain to people like why I did this. But a lot of motivational books use the word "you" a lot, right? You need to get out there and take charge of your life, and you need to go, grab life by the horns. And this, I was very careful. I don't completely avoid the word "you" in the book, but I use it very sparingly because I'm trying to avoid that emotional charge. I want the information to be thought on and digested and used for its own merit, not, just this thing that emotionally charges you up and makes you feel like you should take action. And so, like, that's why it's even also taken longer in the editing process, is because the tone of the book between me and the few others that are editing it has been carefully picked over, and how we want to address it. So that's also why it's been taking a while in the editing process.
I like that, because it feels like those kind of self-help books are saturated and they're very, very samey. So to have, I guess, almost a disruptor of your book being there, I think that'll be nice to see and refreshing for people to kind of get hold of. So I guess potentially when it comes out, we can bring you back on and talk about it. But if people want to keep up to date with when it might be available, if they want to kind of keep up to date with what's happening with you, and I don't know, maybe they're a competitor and they're interested in coaching with you, where should they kind of head?
If you want coaching, definitely go to my website. It's teamwilsonbb.com. And then if you want to keep up what's going on with me, Instagram is always a good place. It's CW Team Wilson. I have a hard time keeping up with my Instagram messages like I should. So if you want coaching, send it through the website, not through Instagram messages, because sometimes it gets away from me really, really something fierce.
I bet.
No,
I can imagine.
If I have one New Year's resolution this year, is to post more frequently on Instagram. Sometimes I get away from social media. It's easy for me to sometimes be like, oh, I haven't posted in a week or two, but I've resolved to post more on social media this year and kind of give a little bit more a glimpse into what's going on.
No, absolutely. I'm kind of jealous of you being that far away from social media, to be honest, because I'm sure it's helping with your low stress as well. So for the book, where will that be available when it is? Do you know?
I was going to do the pre-sale just off of my website.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I was going to do the pre-sale, and then I was going to list it on Amazon thereafter. But yeah, I'm going to do the pre-sale. I'm going to pre-sale by April 1st, and then maybe even pre-sale before if everything goes according to plan. But my hope is that, once again, we can get it out there and coaches can start using it in their contest seasons too, like to help with clients, and clients can use it for their shows or whatever you want to use it for. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting that one out there and just getting it in people's hands.
Fantastic. Cliff, this has been great. I'm going to make sure it is less than 2 years before I reach out and bring you on again. I don't know how that really happened, because you're one of my favorite people to talk to. But thank you so much for your time. I hope the best for your training and kind of your kind of health and well-being and everything. And I'm sure all the listeners are the same, but definitely, guys, give Cliff a hand for coming on, and thank you again. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.